And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick here to take you through to the closing bell with the global simulcast. It starts right now. Carol, Massar and Tim Stenovec in the radio booth. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms. Here on a Fed day, Carol and Tim, where we got pretty much exactly what the market had expected, though the market reaction maybe not quite what some were anticipating.
Yeah, we were just spending a lot of time talking about that with Megan Horniman, Chief Investment Officer at Verdence Capital Advisors. They've got about $4 billion in assets under management. Kind of interesting, and maybe now it's up to the markets. If the Fed is concerned about inflation, then certainly you're going to see that play out in the Treasury trade. She is concerned that the Fed is focusing too much on the labor market versus the inflation pressures that they laid out once again that are still in existence.
You know, the excitement that I think we saw in the markets right when the dot plot came out, right when the rate cut came out, and before we heard from Jay Powell, I think it made sense. But then if you think about it from the perspective of, okay, what has this Fed chair done throughout his 1.5 terms so far? He said, we're data dependent, we're going to go meeting to meeting. So of course he's not going to be able to be confident about the rate path, when there's so much data that we're going to get even between now and the end of October.
And this has pretty much been in line with the way Jerome Powell has sort of conducted policy pretty much since, we should point out, Trump appointed him way back when. And this sort of methodical, keep an eye on the data. It's a big part of the reason why they paused those rate cuts in January, because they wanted to take a look. He said it specifically at what the impact of tariffs and trade policy and Trump policies would be on the economy. And he addressed that today and basically said, at least for right now, that impact is relatively contained.
Yeah, saying not incredibly obvious what the Fed should do now. So they, too, are in a little bit of a pickle, right?
Interesting day in equity markets. We should point out that when that 2 p.m. statement came out, we did see markets push incredibly higher. The Russell 2000 at one point actually did trade above its record high for the first time since 2021, but it's not going to close anywhere near that. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to finish the day in the green, up about 260 points or 0.6%. The S&P down about 0.1%, closing right around that 6,600 level. The NASDAQ Composite and NASDAQ 100 each lower by about 2 to 0.3%. And the Russell 2000 is maintaining some of its gains on the day, higher by 4 points or 0.2%. But we should point out at one point, Carol, it was up a full 2 percentage points.
Got to say, we were thinking about you. We know you like to talk about that index and just kind of watching the move, but certainly a little bit different by the end of the day. Hey, S&P 500 guys, I know you're going to get into the industry groups there, Romaine, but you did have about 288 names actually gaining on this Fed Wednesday, 213 to the downside, 2 unchanged.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, though. I mean, you talk about how do you get 288 names, the majority of the names in the S&P rallying, yet it finishes in the red. Well, a big part of the reason is, well, tech was pretty much at the bottom of that list. As a sector, it was the worst performing of the 11 sectors out there. Your leaders, though, on the day were a lot of the interest rate sensitive sectors, including financials. They were your gainers here on the day. Utilities also getting a pretty strong bid as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of red there, right? When you really kind of break it down in that way. Hey, listen, let's get to some of the individual gainers. Workday, this was a standout in both the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. At one point, let me just see, up about 10%, almost 10% at its highs of the session, finishing though still with about a gain of about 7.25%. Company's board authorized a buyback of up to an additional $4 billion worth of shares. And also you had Elliott Investment Management unveiling a $2 billion plus investment in the company. The activist investor saying the company's CEO and his team have made substantial progress in recent years, driving growth and customer retention. They put out a statement yesterday. So investors moving into that one.
And did you take a look at just kind of the long-term chart on this? I mean, just really one of the biggest laggards in this space that we've seen.
No, I know. You're right. A long-term perspective always important on this one, but to see some investor momentum at this point, but that's what an activist investor will do. We'll get investors to take a second look. Hey, Baidu, also an outperformer, finishing pretty much at its best levels of the session. I'm looking at the ADRs, ticker BIDU, finishing up more than 11% in today's session. It is China's largest search engine operator. Overnight, I should point out, shares jumped in Asia, the most in over 2 years, and analysts upgrading the company, citing the growth potential for its in-house chip business. So you had a bunch of analysts coming out. Arete Research Services lifted its rating on Baidu's American ADRs to buy from sell. It had held the only sell recommendation on the stock since it downgraded it last May. So this one and a bunch of other analysts coming out and weighing in. Everybody's looking at me. I'm a little nervous.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I just feel bad about Krispy Kreme.
Okay, we're going to get to Krispy Kreme. Let's go there.
And by everybody, you meant
this
Tim.
is this is Tim moving me along. Stock was up about 11.5%
That's why I feel bad.
session.
That's why I feel bad.
Still eking out a gain, but not even a 1 full percentage point.
I'm sorry, Carol.
I
convinced her to do it, Romaine. I said, you got to do
No, this is
Krispy
a big
Kreme.
story.
I know it was a big story.
Absolutely.
FBI
So what's the deal now? The FBI director, what is he? Is he like taking over Krispy Kreme? What's happening?
No, he's got a day job already, and he's
Does
also
he?
been pretty busy, answering questions from members of Congress. The FBI director,
answer
Kash
them?
Patel, questioned by one representative before the House Judiciary Committee about stock purchases from a disclosure form he signed in July. He was asked about the transactions. Including one in a national coffee house chain, that would be this one, and also one in a semiconductor company. On Semiconductor was on the move too, but yeah, I thought we'd highlight this one.
And just two quick honorable mentions. Just want to point out PayPal jump popping about 3% on that partnership with Google. And of course, Lyft now at its highest level since 2022, Carol, on news here of that partnership with Waymo.
I'm glad you did Lyft, because now I can talk about Uber. It was the second biggest decliner in the S&P 500.
We didn't even plan this out.
We didn't. We didn't. Down 5% today.
You guys were on TV together this earlier. I'm sure you planned a lot of stuff.
As Romaine mentioned, Lyft is partnering with Waymo to offer robotaxi service in Nashville starting next year. It may sound kind of familiar because Uber has a lot of these deals already. This one is the first one between Waymo and Lyft. Waymo is already an established partner with Uber. These two companies have struck multi-year deals. Back in 2023, Uber now offers Waymo trips in Phoenix, Austin, and Atlanta. So Uber declining on the news that Lyft is now playing with Waymo as well. Also, not all IPOs in the last few weeks doing stellar. Look at StubHub today. Actually fell 6.4% in its debut, falling below the IPO after the ticketing platform raised $800 million in its IPO. The company sold 34 million shares at $23.50. And its market value is about $8.5 billion. That's based on the outstanding shares listed in its earlier findings. And finally, General Mills falling today by 0.8%, even though the company reported adjusted earnings per share for the fiscal first quarter that topped estimates.
I just want to point out, you mentioned StubHub falling below its IPO price. We should point out Gemini Space, which went public last week at $28 a share, opened at $37, closing below that $28 price at 24 and change here on this Wednesday afternoon. We are expecting some earnings, I believe, out of Cracker Barrel. They are crossing the wire right now. Let's take a look. Of course, a company that has been in the spotlight mainly for political and culture war reasons. Well, this is a bottom line story, and the bottom line is a miss. 74 cents a share in the most recent quarter. The street was looking for 76 cents a share, though revenue did come in above estimates at about $868 million. Here's the company's guidance going forward for 2026, which is basically the fiscal year that they are in right now. They say that revenue will be in a range of $3.35 to $3.45 billion. The high end of that range below the average of analyst estimates of $3.52 billion.
All right, I'm looking through the press release, and yes, there is commentary on the logo controversy. It's the first thing, and pretty much the only thing that's mentioned at the top. Julie Masino, the company's president and CEO, said, quote, "We thank our guests for sharing their voices and their passion for Cracker Barrel in recent weeks, and we've listened, switching back to our old-timer logo, hitting pause on remodels and placing even bigger emphasis in the kitchen and other areas that enhance the guest experience. Many elements of our plan are working well and delivering results."
Well, I got to say, this is a stock
nightmare is over.
that is heavily shorted. About 25% of the float is shorted. So on any, you'll see some activity maybe coming off of these earnings, that's for sure.
All right. We'll keep an eye on that. We should point out those shares are still slipping here. And really just a reminder, of course, as some of these companies get caught up in the culture wars, we turn back to what's going on in the macro environment. And you're taking a look at yields right now, which are higher across the board. Remember, we came into today with yields moving lower. They actually moved lower on the back of that 2 p.m. announcement by the Fed about cutting rates. But once Jay Powell got to talking and people started assessing what Jay Powell had to say, you did see yields push higher. We should point out, though, at those levels, 3.5 on the 2-year yield and roughly about 4% on the 10-year yield. That's still materially lower than where we were just a few months ago.
Have you ever been to a Cracker Barrel?
Yes.
Oh, okay. A lot?
I've been to them. Yeah, I have no comment.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. That feels a little chilly. Okay.